What happens when the law itself is accused of breaking the law?
Sexual harassment allegations against Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge.
Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge says
Selby Mbenenge.
Sexual harassment against Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge.
Can someone in power truly flirt with someone beneath them without it being coercive? What happens when no is seen just as a starting point and not as a boundary? And when screenshots become evidence, whose story do we really believe? Today, we're diving into a very complex, uncomfortable, and culturally layered case of Judge President Selby Mbenenge. This case has been trending all over social media. We're not just unpacking the allegations, but we're asking deeper questions. Is no means no still relevant in the African context? And how do we define consent in a world ruled by power and by games? Let's start with what we know so far about the case. Judge President Selby Mbenenge is president of the Eastern Cape High Court, one of the most powerful figures or legal figures in South Africa. A junior court employee has accused him of sexual misconduct, saying that he reportedly made advances she found inappropriate. WhatsApp chats between the two are the central evidence. This is where things get tricky. The judge says it was mutual and that they were in a flirtatious relationship. He further says that he hoped it would lead into something more meaningful. What is really going on here? Let's first tackle the idea of no means no. Judge President Selby Mbenenge argues that in the Xhosa culture, a man is expected to chase, just like in most African cultures. He claims that unlike the Western interpretation of no means no, sometimes in African courtship, a no can be part of the negotiation. So according to him, courting, I believe a lot of people will agree with him, courting in most African cultures, it happens kind of like a negotiation. He argues that no is not always a firm rejection, but a part of how attraction is culturally expressed by the female party or by the lady. So now we have this serious question: is the idea of no means no culturally Western? And if so, does that make the African way of courting inherently wrong? Let's talk about the problem with chat evidence. So one of the biggest challenges in this case is that the main evidence is chat history. Well, this is because the JP and the complainant would interact via text. I believe we are going to see a lot of this in court over the next, particularly in cases like this, over the next coming years, because nowadays the process of courting begins on social media. But now screenshots, texts, even voice notes can't show emotions, like real life emotions. Emojis don't show discomfort. They don't show someone weighing survival over self-respect, particularly in a case like this where power is involved. So the system is relying more on chat evidence or digital evidence, but through screenshots we cannot tell the full context or cannot see the full context. It's very unclear whether the lady was flirting back or she was replying from a position of fear in instances where she reciprocated. The evidence presented could be misinterpreted. They even at some point had to call emoji experts. I didn't know we had those, but hey man, we're in 2025 right now. Let's talk about what's really at the heart of this case: power. So power is an invisible force. Judge President Selby Mbenenge is not just a man. He isn't just a boss. He is a literal head of a court. He's a man who embodies the justice system, right? The lady who was cross-examining him at some point brought this up, the issue of power. And he argued that the Labor Relations Act doesn't apply to him because he is neither an employer or an employee. So he's not legally obligated to behave in a particular way. But now, as we all know, legality is not the same as morality. Just because something is legal doesn't mean that it's morally correct. He further argued that he knows of judges who have married people that were junior to them in the workplace. Of course,
I know of judges who married their secretaries in this country. Heavens did not fall.
Well, the answer will be two wrongs don't make a right.
I don't
those
believe
who
there's.
believe that
I
it's
don't
wrong.
believe that there was anything wrong.
So
The
he
crucial
makes that argument that is not the first person to make this kind of advances. But now we can't ignore the fact that power is at play simply because legally is not obligated to acknowledge such. We know that people often tolerate and encourage attention from someone who is in a position of power, not because they're attracted to them, but because they are afraid or they hope for a particular reward. So in this instance, of course, I'm just speculating and we're just analyzing this case. I'm not saying that it's exactly the case, but there is a good chance that the lady was reciprocating because she was scared of losing a job. Of course, the judge argues that he was not in a position to fire her. But if you are someone who works under the office of a judge president and the judge president likes you and is giving you attention, of course, you're not going to ignore him. Again, we saw this in the Milgram experiment, that people usually take instructions regardless of how insane they are when those instructions are given by someone who is in a position of power. This could be a case where the lady was flirting back because she thought that a lot was at stake and that she couldn't risk perhaps losing a job. Also, it could be that this case got this far because she also wanted something from him. That could be the case as well. But my point is, this all stems from the idea of power, that this is something that's between someone who is in a position of power and someone who is beneath that particular person. In simple terms, power distorts consent. It makes yes unreliable and no dangerous. Here's my honest take. Bringing forth allegations like this, implicating someone as superior in the judicial system as Judge President Mbenenge, will definitely not be a walk in the park. I think someone like Judge Mbenenge should know that consent should not be assumed because you are in a position of power, and chances are that person could be responding from a position of fear. Well, I'm curious to find out what the outcome of the judgment in this case will be. Also, I'm curious to know what you think. This conversation is just getting started. This is my first video, by the way, my first full clip on YouTube. Please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you on the next one.